You are listening to a podcast by the Little School of Happiness. My name is Sandra Hayes and I'm your host. Here you will find episodes on all the Vedic teachings like yoga, Ayurveda and Vedic Astrology. For more information about me and my offerings, please go to sandrahayes.eu, or if you're in Germany, sandrahayes.de. Hi again, Aoife.
Hi, Sandra. Back for another topic.
Back for another one. Yeah, it's really nice to see you again.
You too. So we're talking about the Dashas system today.
We are, yeah. It's a question that has been coming up from some of my previous clients a few times, actually, because it is one of the interesting things that separates Western and Vedic astrology, because in both systems we have the transits. So, looking at where the planets are right now to judge the quality of time right now. But the Vedic system has this really beautiful system of the Dashas, and that's just the timelines of when is a certain planet in the chart activated. So we can actually look at that as well. When will be something in the chart activated? And that's a really interesting thing to observe.
And I don't know if we've got across in the series that we've done so far how important the moon is to Vedic astrology.
Yeah.
I think we may have mentioned in the past that, of course, in India, the lunar and the solar calendar are just as important. And there's so many beautiful festivals linked to the different cycles of the moon and the nakshatras of the moon. And moon is really honored beautifully in Vedic astrology. And it's only fitting that we start our Dasha cycle dependent on where the moon is in our chart, and not just where the moon is, but also the nakshatra, the lunar mansion that the moon is in, and who owns this lunar mansion.
Exactly.
And whoever owns the lunar mansion starts this 120-year cycle.
Yeah. It's 120 years that potentially we could live as human beings. So that's why it's 120 years of a lifetime, of a potential human lifetime. And of course, we're not all that lucky to be even 100. So we won't maybe experience all the dashas in one lifetime, but potentially we could. But we will experience most of them, and each of in a different way.
Yeah, and it's a cycle that is the same in some ways for everybody. So this 120-year cycle is divided into periods of time where you're particularly influenced by each of the 9 grahas, the planets. And where we come into that, we begin our cycle from that point. And it really sets a flavor or tone for the lifetime where you come in. And of course, you could argue that it's no coincidence where you come in or where you've chosen to come in.
Yeah.
And even if it's just a little 3 months or 6 months of this energy, it sets the tone for the lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I find really interesting as well is it doesn't start at 0, 0. You often look at the cycle and it starts at minus 0.5. So even before we are born, we are in a cycle. It's pointing to something. And of course, like everything in our chart, it's karmic.
Absolutely, yeah. And just to illustrate as well. So, Aoife, what was your dasha that you were born into?
Well, for a long time, I thought it was Saturn. And that is, that's very much the theme of my life, Saturn and Ketu, serious and spiritual. And Saturn, of course, being a blessing and a curse. It felt quite right to me for many reasons. I suppose we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on. But I was old as a child. I was an old head on young shoulders. But actually, when I looked at my chart and my Dasha system more closely, I had almost a year of Jupiter first.
Yeah.
And that's actually really important. Marianne pointed that out to me, that the energy of Jupiter, because I came in under that energy of Jupiter, is actually very important to my underlying energy. And even if it's just a little peak of that energy, it really sets the tone. And I like to think that it, neutralize some of the heavier karmic energy that Saturn can bring as you come in. But I also like to think, because of course Saturn being connected to karma and wisdom, that perhaps this isn't my first lifetime. I often wonder that about people coming in under K2 or under Dasha, coming in with wisdom that has been accumulated perhaps in many lifetimes before this one.
Absolutely, yeah. And maybe, the little bit of Jupiter that you got, which is a beautiful blessing that Jupiter gave you just before Saturn came and, took over. And Jupiter being the guru, it's no coincidence, I'm sure, that you ended up teaching a lot of spiritual topics. So, both of them, of course, Saturn being the yogi and, the spiritual practitioner, but with that little bit of Jupiter, that makes a really beautiful mix, actually.
It's a nice mix of knowledge and wisdom. I'm just laughing to myself as you say it, though, because I remember I was a bit of a know-it-all when I was a child. I think I was a bit annoying.
Well, you were meant to be a teacher. You knew it already as a child.
And how about you, Sandra? What Dasha did you come in under?
Well, I actually did come into Saturn, and I was in Saturn for 14 years. And this really, for me, it's really quite telling, because for one, yes, I was definitely a serious child as well. And all the Saturn qualities were there for me. I didn't grow up with my mother for the first few years, for the first 6 years. I was with my great-grandmother, and that actually is Saturn as well, because Saturn is the old person, and it's the grandfather or the grandmother. And interestingly, in my chart, Saturn is in Taurus, and Taurus has a lot to do with nourishment and food. And so I was brought up with my great-grandmother, who she was a refugee. She came to Germany just after the war, and she had lost a baby of starvation, and she brought other children up as well. But I was the last, and I was born on her birthday, and she was a feeder. Everything was about food and nourishment. So this combination of Saturn in Taurus, and me being born into that scenario, that was, to me, that's very Saturn-like. And then for the first 14 years, I did move in with my mother, but until I was pretty much exactly 14, I was a little bit introverted child. And even as a child, I was kind of interested in philosophy, and I was writing stories and, thinking about life on other planets and all sorts of things. And I was quite shy as well. And when I was 14, I started my Mercury Dasha, and I became a little rebel. I really became very restless, and I became very rebellious. Now, a lot of people probably do at around that age of 14, but for me, it really, it really started to happen. And at 16, I ran away from home, and I moved so many times during my Mercury Dasha. So yeah, it's very, but Saturn, the thing is, coming in on Saturn, it really colors, like you said already, it colors the whole life. My moon and my ascendant are in the Saturn nakshatra of Pushya. And Saturn is placed in a way in my chart that it aspects pretty much all of my other planets. So even though I have a lot of exalted planets and planets at home, but because of that Saturn aspect on almost all of them, it's all tinted with a certain seriousness. It's always very serious. And what I find for me, but also for pretty much everyone I know that has that really deep Saturn, and I think maybe for you as well, I'm guessing, is that really serious urge in this lifetime to clear karma, that we are here really with a mission to free ourselves from karma and to be on a spiritual path, almost with an urgency. So I don't know if you do find that.
I do. It's very serious. I mean, but I also feel, I think we share the urge to help other people with this process as well. Yeah. And to share, perhaps, which is something that was innate in us. And maybe in past lifetimes, we didn't have the circumstances that allowed us to have the freedom, to help other people. And I feel in this lifetime that, I have a lot of freedom, and yet I just want to study and I just want to share what I know. I think I shared it on Instagram. We're doing the same course. So you finished a course and I'm doing that course.
That's right. Yeah, the Vedic counseling course. Yeah, I did that a few years ago, actually, when it started, when the pandemic started and all the online things started to come up. So yeah, it was a very interesting course.
It's very complementary to doing Vedic sessions, isn't it? Vedic astrology sessions.
Absolutely.
Because of course it's led by a Ayurvedic and Jyotish master, expert. What's his name, Sandra?
David Frawley.
Frawley. Yeah. David Frawley. Yes, of course.
Absolutely amazing. And he actually has a lot of free podcasts and YouTube lectures as well. I think I have a lot of his books in my shelf as well. I really like his way of teaching as well. His way of explaining things is very down to earth. And I actually did get a chart reading with his wife once, which was very interesting as well. And really, I can't remember her name now. It's a while ago now. And it was only that one reading, but it was very good and was very interesting. And I remember it was a lot about Saturn as well.
That's a really interesting point, Sandra, isn't it? Because if you're listening to this and you're thinking, well, they are astrologers, so why would they have readings done? It just points to the fact that there is so much depth and there's so many different interpretations of the truth and what we're looking at. It's actually really valuable to get readings done, many times in your life from different astrologers and different perspectives. It's so helpful, isn't it?
Absolutely. And also it's a little bit like, it doesn't matter how much you know yourself about the chart, but we have almost always a few blind spots about ourselves. It's psychology. It's like we need supervision as well, and we need friends to point things out, or we need a tutor or a counselor to see things in a different way, or to help us see things in a different way. And sometimes when we're stuck a little bit in life, not just in astrology, but when we're stuck in life, then it's so helpful to have that other person, the mirror in front of you, and just guide you out a little bit.
Absolutely. I have in my Revolut account, they have little wallets that you can save money.
Yeah.
I have a wallet for my Andrew Foss reading because I'm going to hopefully get that this year. But
very nice.
That's what I'm looking forward to. But as you were talking earlier, I have this very clear memory. It'll probably give you a picture of what it's like to be a Saturnian child. Maybe you can identify with this. But I remember sitting in primary school and all the other kids had gone to the library, but for some reason I was left on my own. And I had a book with me that I felt the need to start transcribing. And I just had this vision of myself as a monk transcribing a Bible, you know, with all the illumination and stuff. And I was sitting there in a classroom on my own. I could have been doing anything, but I was transcribing this book because I felt like it was my job to transcribe it. So that is, you know, and that was me at about 7.
Amazing, actually. And you know, with your you coming in into your Jupiter, I was, you know, it could well be that in a past life you were some type of spiritual teacher of some sort, you know, and coming in on that flavor coming in again.
Well, I don't doubt it. There's something very monkish about my tendencies. And I, at least 4 times a year, go down and stay in the Hermitage in Glendalough. And
Right.
that is a really, you know, the valleys of Glendalough are a very powerful place. You know, pre-religion, of course, it was Druidic.
Yeah.
And there's caves there that are, you know, Bronze Age caves and have been used for different religious and spiritual purposes for thousands of years. And I'm always, it was one of the first monastic, you know, centers in Ireland. And I'm always fascinated with the monk who set it up, because he set it up, he founded himself. And yet, as soon as the other monks arrived, because they found him and they built, you know, the Tower of Glendalough, this beautiful place, he left and he went down to the lower lakes and he lived on his own for 7 years because he couldn't even bear
Right.
the company of the other monks who had arrived. It's so fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, that's
But I feel drawn to that place.
yeah.
And so I stay down there, you know, at least 4 times a year for solitude. It's a silent retreat that I do. And
Yeah.
that's very much honoring. I was doing a reading with someone recently and I was talking about this because they're in the householder stage of their lives, and yet they had come into K2 and they were really feeling a pull to withdraw. And it's difficult to shut yourself away and withdraw if you need to be in the world, making the school lunches, doing the school runs, you know, going to meetings in the world of work. And I think we can carve out these spaces to honor the energy, because they are, as we're talking about Dashas, they are periods of energy. For example, the K2 period is 7 years. And if you realize that this is where I'm at the moment, and don't fight it,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
can honor it. Yeah.
Aren't you in your K2 right now, or is that
Coming to the very end,
yeah?
very end. So this is a 7-year period for me where I have chosen to be quite reclusive. You know, I'm, in terms of relationships, I had a few kind of short relationships, but nothing sustained, very deliberately. And, you know, as of course it fits with my life. I'm still rearing my children, you know, I'm doing those things, but I've really focused on yoga, particularly going deeper in yoga philosophy. It's within this time, of course, that I studied Jyotish, that I got deeper into my practices, my transcendental meditation. And yet I set up a lot of sanghas and community around my teaching. So it's not completely alienating myself, but I'm very, I don't know how this sounds, but I really curate who I spend my time around, because my time for myself is very precious. And I'm aware that it's coming to an end. And I'm already starting to feel it come to an end. And it's a very dramatic shift from K2 naturally into 20 years of Venus. That's a long time. And you're in Venus, right?
Venus, yeah. I know. And I mean, K2 is coming right before Venus. So during my 7 years of K2, because I think K2 is when you're in K2 Dasha, and I don't know if you find the same, but it's like it brings you onto your purpose in life. It kind of introduces you to, what is it that's really important and that you should really do right now and concentrate and focus on, and everything else that's not conducive to that will fall away, fall apart. And
Well, that makes sense, because K2 is about detachment.
yeah, and K2 is really about, it's about detachment and letting go, but it's the detachment of things that we don't need anymore. And during my 7 years, this was the only time in my life I had fallouts with friends, was in my 7-year K2 cycle. It was like 2 or 3 people that I had a falling out with, and I didn't know why. I didn't understand it, but later, looking back, I understood that I must have emanated that K2 energy of being detached, and I didn't quite understand it myself, but I think from their point of view, I wasn't as attached to them anymore, or to, and yeah, that can be maybe difficult for other people. But also another thing that happened during my K2 phase, and this is one thing that Marianne told us, that K2, because it's so complex, and K2 is about detachment and it's about elevation as well, but in a subtle sense, it's also about dance, things like, the creative expression of dance. And during the 7 years, dance was so important for me. I opened a dance studio. I started to, create these women's dance communities. I went to Serbia to study Roma dance, funded by the Irish Arts Council. Everything was about dance. And I felt a big fulfillment from that. I felt really like this is my path, as if, and it wasn't so much just about the creative expression of the dance, but it was for the effect it had on the community, on the women that came, and the healing effect of the dance. And it felt very much like a heart's mission, a heart's path that I was going on during that dasha.
That's beautiful, because that's ancestral, isn't it? This is going back into your, and I think there's an element of that with K2 as well, isn't there?
And
ancestral karma.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's very healing. And I suppose have I been lucky? Would I say lucky? I mean, I suppose it has unfolded as it's supposed to unfold, because I don't know how I would have got on my K2 dasha if I was still married.
Yeah.
I have needed to spend a lot of time on myself. And maybe with the right partner, that would be okay, of course. But I also am thinking, look, just enjoy being single for these 7 years, because I know I'll meet someone, or I'll probably have a relationship in my Venus dasha, because one of the things we do in Venus is we fall in love. It's about abundance, not always romantic love, but I think the value in knowing that is that you're not rushing anything. You're just letting it unfold, and there's less of an impatience. And that avoids frustration then that a lot of people feel, I think.
Yeah. And maybe there's even more gratitude for what we actually have at this moment in time, because it's a certain quality of time that we get in any given moment. And rather than wishing it away, and rather than resisting it, knowing that this actually is a gift, it's a certain quality, and we can make the most out of it. And then it will pass again, and it will change into a different quality.
And it does change, because we've really been talking about what's known as, well, the Vimshatari dasha is the most commonly used dasha, but the Maha dasha, like Mahabandha, like mother or major. So the major dasha is the major overlying energy. But then, of course, there's the sub-dashas as well, of the 9 planets running alongside the major dasha. And they play a part too, don't they?
Very big part. All these undercurrents, while the big theme of the dasha is still there, but these undercurrents keep changing and influencing in waves and rhythms. It's almost like a fractal like energy that keeps changing, and it's it has a big influence. I think I can almost feel. I look up sometimes. I look at my software. Where am I at? When's the next change? And it matches every time. I can sense it already. I can feel it shifting. And so interesting.
And it's It's at its
Sorry.
most intense. It's at its most intense when we change Mahadasha. And that's a huge phase in anybody's life, isn't it?
Very
Um,
much.
because some of these periods are very long, like I mentioned. Actually, from the Ayurvedic perspective, it makes sense because the Pitta planets are a shorter period of time, right? Because they're hot, they're a quicker
Much
time
more.
frame
Yeah.
as opposed to the cooler. But yeah, Venus is 20 years. Rahu Dasha is 18 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jupiter 16, Saturn 19, Mercury 17. So, I mean, these are major periods of our lives. A lot happens in these major periods
Yeah.
of our life. And when we come into the new Mahadasha, it's double. I kind of always explain it as double. So it's not just that you're, say, coming into Mercury Dasha, your sub Dasha when you come in will be Mercury. So you'll be Mercury, Mercury.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So double Mercury. Yeah.
So you come in very intensely into it, don't you?
That's it. Yeah. And then it will start to take on the flavors of the other planets. And yeah, and also it depends a lot on how that particular planet is placed in the chart. Because, for example, the Ketu Dasha, Ketu is about detachment and letting go. But yet that doesn't, of course, mean that in Ketu Dasha you won't have a relationship or whatever it is. I had met my husband during my Ketu Dasha, but I had met him during Ketu Rahu. And my Rahu is in the 7th house of relationship. So during that axis, when that axis was activated of Rahu and Ketu, I had met my husband, which was kind of my major relationship in my life. And what was interesting as well, maybe, is that we had a very good relationship, and we do still get on to this day, even though we separated. But one thing that at the end was a little bit difficult for me was that he was very much the introverted type, a very, very K2-like introverted type. That made me feel, after the kids were gone, and made me feel a little bit of a lack of emotional affection. So, he was almost like a little bit of an Asperger type. So, this was great during the time we were together, but it just shows again that flavor of Ketu. We met during Ketu. That axis of Rahu Ketu was activated in my 7th house. And also he had that energy of Ketu. He's a very spiritual person as well, very detached and spiritual person. So yeah, this is how it can play out.
And it's really interesting to look at your family members as well in terms of dashas, because there's always so much information you can discover. And there's two things that spring to mind for me. And one of them, I was going to say it's coincidence, but of course it's never a coincidence. But my eldest daughter, her moon is in the same nakshatra as my moon. We both share a debilitated moon.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
In Scorpio. So that's coincidental.
Yeah.
But the degrees are similar enough that we share the same ascendant nakshatra, which means our dashas started at exactly the same time. So she's running the same dasha that I ran. She's having her children in Mercury dasha. I had my children in, some of my children in Mercury dasha. She, interestingly, was born in my Saturn dasha because I had her when I was just turned 16.
Yeah.
So that's another Saturnian thing, isn't it? To become a mother very young.
Yeah.
But I'm just watching her life unfolding, and it's a very similar pattern to mine. And we share that, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And then my son was born into, I think he had a little flavor of Mars, but he's spent his first 18 years of his life. Up until he's 20, he was in Rahu Dasha, which means that he had 2 years of Mars when he was born. And then he spent the majority of his young life and all of his teenage years in Rahu Dasha, which just, they all have their blessings and their challenges. But for him, I always felt like I had this feeling, even before I knew anything about astrology. So this only confirmed my feeling that I had to really look after him until he was 20. Now, he'd kill me for saying that. He's a grown man. He's 6'4" now. But I just knew when I got to him to his 20th birthday, I actually just took one of the biggest sighs of my life, because I just had a feeling that if Rahu is working with him when he's so young, it can be in some ways dangerous. It's a very intense energy to be working with at such a young age. And that doesn't mean that you should ever be frightened of your dasha system, but it's pointing to certain challenges that maybe if you had your Rahu Dasha later in life, you'd be more emotionally mature in your dealings with.
That's true. Although, it depends on the influence as well, and on the age. And, that's very true. But, I think all of the planets can be more difficult when you're young. For some people, Venus, who's a very benefic planet, can be very difficult when you're young, because it's, you kind of developing your sexuality as well, your sensuality, your ability to love. And that when you're immature can also, I know 2 people who have developed eating disorders during their Venus Dasha when they were young. So that can be an issue as well. And my son was actually born into Rahu as well. And he was there until I think he was 9 years old. And Rahu being, when you were young, then your karma is played out by your family often. And did you say your son was born into Rahu as well?
He had some Mars first. He had 2 years of Mars.
Yeah, because often when you're born into Rahu, then sometimes that means that you're born into a family who is just a little bit different, to the rest of society. And I actually remember my son, he had a very good group of friends, and I would, drive them around sometimes, and they'd spend a lot of time in our house. And I was listening in as a mom. I was listening into one of their conversations, and they were talking about what great friends they all are. It's like a group of 6 or 7 guys that were always hanging out, and they were talking about how just they get on so well. And and then my son's friend said, "I know why that is. All of our moms are really weird." Because all of our, the moms were like yoga teachers or astrologers or whatever. So,
I definitely fit into that category, Sandra. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's like Rahu's other side. It's not just always negative, but it's just Rahu is the one, he's the one who's not like the others. He can be eccentric, he can be a little bit individual. So yeah, that's another side to it, being born into Rahu.
I mean, really, life is about cycles within cycles, isn't it? And when we can get a sense of the rhythm of these cycles, it does, allow for surrender. And just, I suppose, the beauty of Jyotish is, it's all unfolding. It's all going to happen. To me, the dashas are just another sense of reassurance. And I love looking at clients' charts, and you could nearly guess that, you never know how things will manifest. But, did you become a mother in Moon Dasha? That certainly would not be unusual. Or did you really just step into your power in your Sun Dasha? And, they'll have lots of examples of this. And I think it's interesting to look, I might have mentioned this before in one of the other podcasts, about how the order in which they naturally come. There's a beautiful cycle to that, isn't there? So, the sun, I suppose, is about finding the self, and the mother is, or the moon is more about nurturing. Mars is this courageous, determined energy. And then Rahu is lifting the veils of illusion. Then comes Jupiter, expanding everything, often expanding your life before Saturn lets things fall away and you contract. And then Mercury, you're outward facing again, in commerce and communication and studies. And then Ketu's drawing you back in. And then Venus is drawing you out again. There's a lovely kind of rhythm to it, isn't there?
It's very beautiful. Yeah, it's very beautiful. And it just, the beauty of it is really just to surrender to the qualities of time, and that not all of the things are negative, or not all of the positives are positive all of the time either, but a lot of it depends on our attitude toward it, and how much resistance we have against the present moment in time. Because isn't it, our happiness depends not on circumstance but on our ability to really allow the present moment to unfold as it is. And even when there's a planet in transiting planets, often people talk about retrograde Mercury, and then you have all these glitches and communication problems, and didn't we have a really nice communication issue today as well?
Oh, we did. I got some compliments. I received some compliments that were not meant for me, but I received them anyway. So they were really beautiful.
That's another way. It's just, it's just, I had a conversation with my friend through voicemail, and she wasn't having a great day, and she didn't feel great about herself on that day. So I tried to pick her up, and I sent her a lot of compliments. I told her all the things that I think are amazing about her, and I accidentally sent it to Aoife. So Aoife received all of a sudden a lot of compliments. And, these are the things. It's even though it wasn't originally meant for you, Aoife, but they all matched for you just as well. They match your personality.
Well, the timing was great. I wasn't having a great morning, and I just thought, wow, I got a sense that actually this isn't meant for me. But I thought, what a great friend Sandra is. I'm just going to listen to this anyway.
And you know what? It was meant for you, because the universe just sent it your way. And that's, or Mercury, because we do have a retrograde Mercury at the moment. So that's the nice side about a retrograde Mercury. There's always a meaning to it. Mercury probably thought, now hold on a second, Aoife could do with some of that.
Yeah. And, people talk about technology being down. My 13-year-old daughter really couldn't cope with the fact that there's something wrong with Spotify today worldwide. And but when we started our call, she was on my bed, wasn't she? She never comes in. I mean, she doesn't want to spend time with me. She's 13. But on my laptop, we were watching music on YouTube. So rather than her being in her room, we were together. So that's another favorable outcome of, communication.
Yeah. I think a big lesson for us, and that's the lesson that the planets can give us as well. We have to just trust the flow of time. We have to just trust it. For me as well, in the last, since I'm in Germany in 4 years, I have, started my life from scratch again, literally. And there were so many moments where I was so frustrated because, I sent applications for jobs and I get rejections, and I was so frustrated. But then later it turns out, well, actually, I'm glad that didn't work out, because something else that I didn't even know about at the time, is working out now. And we just don't know why something is happening, but I think we can always trust that it's happening for a reason, and that it's good the way it is.
Yeah, and it's more Herta, isn't it? Timing. I mean, it's not my speciality. I don't know if you've done much work with it, but the Dashas are really used in timing. It is a specific branch of Jyotish. And it would make sense if you want to start a business, if particularly if Mercury or Jupiter are favorable in your chart, yeah, do it during your Jupiter dasha, do it during your Mercury dasha. The time is ripe for that. So it can help with questions, like that. And particularly if you dig into the sub dashas, you could really exact your timing.
Often we sense it anyway, I'm in Venus since quite a while. Venus is 20 years, and I'm in Venus still another good 4 or 5 years, 4 years probably. And I'm in Venus Saturn right now. And this has been going on since, can't remember, 2 years maybe, I'm not quite sure. But I have been doing training in dance and movement therapy and creative therapies. And that training will be hopefully finished. We have our first exam in July, and that's exactly when Saturn will be finished. And then Mercury will come in then as a sub-dasha. So it just matches, I'm in my Saturn phase. I'm literally, I'm not going out and having fun. I'm sitting at home working or studying.
But is that not fun?
It is.
Yeah, you see?
Yeah. While Saturn is here for me, he's also giving me the feeling for it and the ability to do it and the patience and the interest in it. Without Saturn, I probably couldn't do it. I couldn't have done it in any other time frame as that. So yeah.
You reminded me, I do a sauna once a week. We have these little these little box saunas by the sea now where I live. So I love doing my sauna once a week, but it's very interesting who you get stuck in the sauna with because it's very small. And on Monday night, the noise levels were huge. There was 2 guys who knew each other, another 3 women who knew each other, and another 3 guys who knew each other. And they were all trying to talk over each other. And I was the only person on my own who would just, I love to go into the sauna and just meditate. But look, it's okay. I get it. But they spent their whole time talking about where they go on the weekend and their plans for their whole summer to go from festival to festival to festival, to travel to travel to travel, and to this wedding to this wedding. And I just felt exhausted by the time I was going out to do my plunge. I thought I couldn't think of anything worse than my life being that busy. And it's great for them in their phase, but it actually made me think, oh my God, I'm so different that, and then I said it to Robin when I came home because she's 13. She goes, Mum, that's because you're 46 and they were probably 20. But I do think it's to do with your dasha as well. What one person's idea of heaven is, that would be my hell now. I have a totally different idea of how I'm spending my time, and that's okay.
And you know what? The interesting thing is you can see it even in children already, because, I work with children. I'm a substitute teacher in a childcare center. And at the moment, I'm doing the, holiday entertainment with them. And we have a bunch of about 20 kids right now. And some of them I know quite well, from other times I'm working there, but some of them are completely new. But, you can see it in them. I don't know their charts, but I know who is a Saturn child sitting in the corner, and and who
Virgo child putting all their things into place.
Absolutely. And it's amazing. But I'm curious to see how it will be like for you when you enter your Venus dasha. When is that?
Maybe I'll be going to all the festivals too. It's actually in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. But
but I like to think of abundance not just in terms of, material abundance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not the rose-tinted glasses that it might be when you're a bit naive, when you're younger.
Yeah.
But it is, and I suppose it is worth noting that everyone, if they live 120 years, will eventually come into, say, Venus Dasha for 20 years. But perhaps you had the tail end of it when you were born and got 6 months of it, or perhaps you'll get it when you're 110, but you mightn't live to it, or you might get it for a year before you die at 80, So it's a nice time actually to be coming into it in a lifetime, and everyone's different.
Yeah, absolutely. And abundance is, not about money anyway. It's not, it's just about, having all the things we need in order to do the things that we want. And that comes in so many different forms and shapes. So, yeah. And whatever dasha we're in, it really is amazing. It can be amazing to use that quality.
And to be aware of the quality, I think, is such a blessing. And this is what Jyotish has given me. It's given to you, and we can give it to our clients as well, which is wonderful, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. All right, yeah. Aoife, that was really nice time again with you.
Yeah, it was great. It was nearly an hour exactly. We're getting the time down, aren't we? But I could talk all day, but I'm really happy that we got to dig a little bit deeper into this topic. It's so interesting.
Very good. Yeah. All right, well, we'll meet again soon. And if there's questions, keep them coming in. And if you want a reading with one of us, the contact details are in the podcast description. So we're looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks,
Sandra.
Thanks.
You were listening to a podcast by the Little School of Happiness. For more information, please go to sandrahayes.eu, or if you are in Germany, sandrahayes.de.